This is Jeff Durkin here with wearechangect Connecticut, out here in Zuccotti Park in New York City, where we were just wrapped up an awesome discussion with activist and photographer, award-winning photographer, Jenna Pope. Jenna, thanks for coming out tonight.
Thanks for being out here.
So maybe just as a background for people who might not know who you are in particular, maybe just a brief background. What was your one thing for getting involved with activism and then using your passion for photography to kind of combine the two and cover different events around the country?
Well, I first got involved, it was about 2.5 years ago. I was living in Wisconsin at the time, so if anybody was following the Wisconsin Uprising there, that I was a part of that. Our governor basically proposed its budget repair bill, and it pretty much it attacked public unions and a lot of other different, pretty much everybody in the state who doesn't make like millions of dollars was affected by it. So, you know, we had 200,000 people come out to our Capitol. We took it over for about 3 weeks. We occupied the Capitol. So we occupied before Occupy Wall Street. So that's when I first got involved as an activist. And in the last 2.5 years, I've continued to stay extremely active. And my role, you know, within the protest scene, in both Wisconsin and also when I moved to New York City, have kind of transformed several different times. And the last year I've been focusing mostly on like photography and using my photos and, you know, my second by second updates on the ground at protests to keep people informed when the mainstream media fails us.
Now, the main focus of this event tonight, Zuccotti Park, was you just got back from a 2-week trip covering the Turkish Uprising and all that. Maybe if you could start, maybe first, maybe a general account of the protest scenes, the protesters compared with the police, and the crackdowns that happened there, including the many times with tear gas. Maybe briefly go over that if you...
That's right. So I first arrived in Taksim Square in the Gezi Park area in Istanbul on June 5th. A couple days before I got there, the police had actually left the area after a few days of violent clashes between the cops and protesters. So when I got there, it was a very festive, very free, so there were no cops around, feeling. So, I mean, the park was filled, the protesters were happy, they were, you know, as I mentioned earlier tonight, they were behaving very well, even though there were no cops in the area. If any problems arose, the people took care of it themselves, and they handled it much better than the cops would have. So it's kind of interesting to see how people worked and how they lived without a police presence. So that's kind of how it was at first. It was joyous, it was festive, and then a few days in, almost a week after I got there, the police came in and they cracked down, and they began using tear gas and water cannons. The first clash went on for over 20 hours, and they were able to clear Taksim Square, but protesters remained in Gezi Park, which is right next to the square. And then a few days after, the cops came back in and they cleared out the park, again using tear gas, water cannons, occasionally using like rubber bullets or plastic bullets. So I saw the situation change completely while I was there, and I was glad. I feel like I was there during a really good time because I was able to experience, you know, both sides of you know, what the protesters have experienced there.
Yeah, it seems like, you know, past all the negative stories and the bad stories about the tear gas and all that, what was one of those positive moments that well, I'm sure there was many of them, but just a couple of them maybe that that stuck out in your mind, maybe with whether it was protesters or more like a positive uprising or positive upbringing?
Yeah. One of the day, like as far as like a full day in general, the first Saturday I was there was definitely one of the highlights. I mean, there was always a few thousand people in Gezi Park, and then every evening, you know, after work, people would come out, and there would always be a few more thousand at least in Taksim Square. But the weekends were always the largest. So the first Saturday I was there, when there were still no cops around, Taksim Square was filled, Gezi Park was filled. There was tons of people, and I remember people just lighting up a bunch of flares. And like the entire sky just like became red from all these flares. Like shooting up in the sky, and there were fireworks, and people were just like super, super excited. You could tell that they were like, you know, I don't know, like ready to create some like awesome change. And obviously at that point they had kind of gotten a little taste of it because the cops had left. So they were kind of living free of that oppressive, you know, police state. So they were kind of feeling like this is what it's like. So I think that was kind of like a big turning point for them. Like that gave them more motivation. Like, this is awesome. Like, we need to keep pushing forward for this. There was a bunch of other little stuff. Like, I showed a photo of people. I mean, even little things like people came in and they were giving haircuts in the park. You know, there was they had like free food. They had free medical care. So they basically, you know, it was the same as a lot of the other occupations, like in Zuccotti Park, and like what we had when I was at the occupation in Wisconsin. It was very similar to those, as in like they kind of created like the society they wanted to see, and it was a society based off of mutual aid, and equality and justice for everybody. So definitely the first few days I was there, those were like the high points as far as the protests while I was there.
And just to wrap up here quick, one of the things that stuck out in my mind was your website, the quote on the top, fighting justice one photo at a time. If you want to come out how you came up with that quote, or what that means to you in general.
So yeah, I was, I mean, I had a photography website even before I did like activism stuff. I kind of stopped using it for a while, but I started it up again. And I was trying to think of, you know, like I use it through WordPress, and there's a spot where you can have like a tagline or whatever, like underneath like the title of your website. And for a while I don't think I had anything up there, and then I was thinking like I should have something. And so I was trying to think, like, you know, I'm not just an activist, and I'm not just a photographer. You know, when I was in Taksim Square, like I met a lot of people who, you know, they photograph protests sometimes, but they said they didn't really consider themselves a protester. So I feel like, I mean, I do know other people who are activists and photographers, or activists and, you know, do live stream, or, you know, make awesome videos. But it's definitely a smaller, you know, percentage of the photographers out there. There's not as many. So I was trying to think of something that would like make it very clear that I wasn't just a photographer, that I consider myself one of the activists, and that I'm trying to report from, you know, the viewpoint of the other activists around me. So that's where I came up with the, you know, I can't remember exactly what it is, activist armed with a camera fighting for justice one photo at a time. So that's what I do. I use my photography to show others who maybe are normally not getting this information because the mainstream media either doesn't report on it or they twist the facts. So I'm trying to report just, you know, what's going without bias. I'm on the ground here with the protesters. This is what they're saying. This is what they're fighting for. These are the photos I took of them. You know, and this is what it's about. This is, you know, it's not about what the mainstream media is saying. It's about, this is what it's about. And I feel like as an activist and as a photographer, I'm in a really good position to bring the truth and the real photos and the real news to people who are willing to listen to it and willing to view the photos.
So one last thing, the most important thing, where people could check out your work, Twitter, any social media platforms you use, which I highly recommend. Check out your awesome photos from Turkey and all that. So just give a quick plug for all your good work out there, how people could support it.
All right, so I have a blog, and my website is www.jennapope.com. That's spelled JENNAPOPE. Through there's a little badge, a Facebook badge on my profile, which if you click that links to my Facebook page. And if you know how to follow someone, I encourage you just to follow. I'm nearing my 5,000 friend limit on Facebook, but all my posts are public, so if you either send me a friend request or you click the follow button, you'll get all of my posts in your news feed. It also links to my Twitter. My handle is @BatmanWI. So if you want to just look at my Twitter, but if you go to my website, jennapope.com, it links to both my Twitter and my Facebook. It's kind of a one-stop shop to find all of my social media stuff.
Because without grassroots media, without citizen journalism, we will not be able to take back the media. We have to make the corporate media irrelevant and take things in our own hands. And I applaud your guys' efforts, and I applaud everyone who's doing similar things, because this is really the revolution right here.
It's a lot larger than us three standing here. It's a lot larger than We Are Changed. It's a lot larger than Public Enemy. All right, but as long as we're here, breathing, we have to at least try to raise the conscious level of the entire human family.